Hi everyone, it's your boy Zach, and this is my review of Dune, my second one since I accidentally deleted the first one at the grocery store. So, sorry to disappoint you all. This is not turned into a Touchstone Movies review channel. So much Bette Midler. Okay, so anyway, it always bothered me when you ask your friend, you're like, hey, have you seen this? They say no, and then like halfway through the movie, they're like, they get up and they wander off. You're like, what are you doing? You're like, oh, I already saw this. It's like, when did you realize? You're like, well, I wasn't sure, but then like halfway through the movie I realized I'd seen it already. It's like, what? This isn't some like generic, CBS police show where with some pretty interchangeable episodes. Like, it's a whole movie. It took you halfway through the movie to realize you saw it before. So I would have sworn I saw all of Dune, I don't know, like 10 years ago. But either I didn't or I was really not paying attention, which is weird for me because I laser focus on shows when I watch them. Even if I only watch them for a couple minutes at a time, if there is one sentence where I didn't hear every single word, I will rewind it until I did, and so I can read it on the closed captioning. So I'm still not sure, but I did watch it all the way through, although it did take me a couple days, but that was mainly because I was watching it very, very late at night, and it's very, very dense. So Dune came out in 1984. I was 11 when it came out in theaters. I remember that summer, I believe it was a summer, very well, and I remember it flopping, although it wasn't like a super flop. It cost $40 million, it made $30 million, and there's been a million reissues of DVD and Laserdisc and VHS and cable and for decades. So I'm guessing eventually it at least broke even. It probably made a small profit, especially if you're talking, things, merchandise and stuff like that. But it came out, and I was, I guess, supposedly the prime age. Maybe it was more for like, I don't know, 14 and up. But it just looked weird. Number one, we had a bunch of Star Wars and Star Trek and Spielberg sci-fi movies with some really, really great special effects. And you were kind of expected every time you did a new one to level up. And the special effects, and I'm talking specifically about like the blaster fire and ships flying in space or in an atmosphere, like that was terrible. Like, shockingly bad. I still can't believe they've done all these, we redid the star fields in the original Star Trek. I still can't believe they didn't say, look, here's $1 million, redo those really shitty spaceship, scenes in Dune. But one of the reasons they did that is because, yeah, it's got problems. Now, I remember for years afterwards, David Lynch would always talk about it like it was, he was a POW or something. Like, it was a period of his life. It was 3.5 years. He just said it was an abject failure and he wished he never did it. So I always imagined this complete disaster piece, and it really isn't. Like, you see it's good. You also see he's trying to be kind of like normie, and you also see why it doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is that it is very clearly a 3-hour movie squished into just over 2 hours. The funny thing is that the first hour works just fine. It has kind of the standard pace for a sci-fi movie. It introduces characters and concepts and settings. I actually usually get really confused when they're like, and then these people from this planet talk to, but no, they show all 4 planets, they name them, they name who controls them, they explain, the Emperor pulled the Harkonnens out of Arrakis, so the Atreides would go in there, and then that would be like their Vietnam, and they would get destroyed essentially. So that part was just fine, and I still remember back in the day, like, all my peers, we didn't look, was it Kyle MacLachlan? We didn't like how he looked. He's got this fluffy hair, he's got rosy cheeks, he's not really tough. And I know a lot of these movies, they're really, they start off as, oh, the guy isn't that tough, and then he gets toughened up. He still looks like a sweater model at the end of it. He looks like a guy from soap operas. So having an action sci-fi story with this, I don't know if I'd call him a sissy. He's just not tough. He looks like every IT like manager I had you might assume that an IT manager is like has to be really good at IT. Not really. They're more of management HR for the actual experts. So he reminds me of a lot of bosses from the corporate world. So the story is about Paul Atreides becoming essentially a messiah on this desert planet called Arrakis. And like I said, the first half is great. I loved the whole explaining all the worlds. The Harkonnens are amazing. You can tell that David Lynch is having his most fun in those scenes. But the young hero being tested and training and going to battle, all these different interesting. I really like Max von Sydow's character. He's I believe he's from the Atreides clan, but he's kind of gone native with the Fremen. And there's all this like kind of really cool stuff. And then the second hour happens, and that is a freaking disaster. First of all, the second hour is essentially a 1 hour montage with narration. Although the narration will be like really heavy, and then there won't be any for like 10 minutes, and all of a sudden some princess is like, "This means that," and you're like, "That's awkward." I mean, they already have this thing where they have the inner voice, which is basically like thought balloons from a comic book. Now, originally, because I'm a big fan of Princess of Mars, John Carter, and it's established that almost all Barsoomians, basically all the different races and species, they're all telepathic. So I thought, oh, maybe like people from the Atreides clan are telepathic. No, it's just like their inner thoughts. And sometimes like they're really obvious, like Paul will survive something and then his mom will say, "He's still alive." You know what I mean? Like, we can see that. But it would be a good part. It's like they kind of forget about that. So they're like, let's just get, who played the princess? You know, the princess in like 3 scenes who doesn't do anything? Yeah, she's narrating just why not? Nothing matters. So like the second half is just like nutty. I mean, it is kind of fun because like the stuff that like people know, oh, riding the worm, oh, that's in there. But it's almost like a whole nother movie, and it's just squished, and it's kind of weird and sad. But overall, like, it's cool. Like, one of the things I really liked, especially about the first hour, is, Dune was a huge phenomenon in the 70s and 80s. I think it's kind of leveled off, but it was huge back then. So I think they kind of made the movie, they're like, most of the people will have read the book. So I kind of felt it was kind of fun. Like, I was not lost, but I was kind of catching up. But I was like, hey, I kind of get it. I understand, this world. And then it's like, it's just, okay, then the second hour happens. So overall, I would definitely call it a recommend. It's got some fantastic visuals and designs. The still suits are so cool. I love how at one point Max von Sydow's character spends like 2 minutes just explaining how the still suit works. Like, but I really like that part. And it's a little wonky because at the end, Paul is basically like, it's cool. So you have the Bene Gesserit witches, which are psychics. Men can't become Bene Gesserit witches, but Bene Gesserit witches can't become the Kwisatz Haderach, like this next level, like cosmic being. So Paul is able to, do these 2 tests that people usually fail at. And he makes it rain, not in the club, but on Arrakis. That part is, I really liked all the different lore, the Harkonnens, although at the end, after Paul does like everything, they're like, hey, remember Sting? Remember Sting? He was like in 3 scenes. I think he talked in one of them. Yeah, Paul has to get in a knife fight with him. Paul won. What the hell? Everything that got... I guess it was because it was Sting. It was the mid-'80s. He was a big deal, so you can't just have him in there and then do nothing. So yeah, the super space Jesus can also win knife fights. God, there's some... I mean... At one point, they have a Mentat, which is like a human computer. He's been captured, and he's like disappeared from the movie for like an hour. And then like Baron Harkonnen's like, "Oh, let's go talk to Thulis." It's like, what? And then Baron's like, "Hey, we poisoned you," and then he shows a cat, in a cage that has a rat taped to it, and he goes, but if you milk this cat, it'll be an antidote. I was like, what the hell? I was like, oh yeah, David Lynch. Oh, so what I was saying is, David Lynch just didn't like adapt to screenplays. Like, he wrote the screenplay and then he added things. And from not being a Dune expert, but I was reading, and it looks like even like people who read the novels, like, you know, they like the changes. Like, Baron Harkonnen doesn't have all these pustules in the books, but, you know, he wanted him to be disgusting, and like, you just see him and he's just evil, and like all these pustules kind of symbolize that. The weirding modules were not, I guess they weren't in the book, or not anything the same, and he's like, look, I don't want him just doing karate, let's give him some cool sci-fi weapons. I was like, yeah, that's cool. Kind of reminded me of The Boys. Like, The Boys is an okay comic, but the TV show is excellent, because every time there was like a fork in the road, they made a better decision than the comic made. So it's definitely a recommend if you've never seen it. I heard there was a miniseries like 20 years ago that was like pretty legit. And the movie by Denis Villeneuve, who did Blade Runner, I always forget if it's 2047 or 2049, whatever. The Blade Runner sequel, which everyone seems to like. So that looks cool as well. They got like a kind of like a twerpy guy to play Paul, but then I was reading that Paul is like 15 in the novel, in the first novel, so it makes sense, you know. Obviously he'll grow if there's sequels, and then he'll be, you know, more of like, yeah, it was a good fun time. It was very dense, and I really saw, like, especially in the first hour, I understood why, you know, someone like Comic Book Girl 19 would get really into Dune. It reminds me of like when I got really into John Carter. It's a very well defined world. It's very interesting. There's a lot of things you can do there. So anyway, thanks for watching. I'm not sure which movie I'm going to review next. I'm watching like 4 or 5. I'm watching Legend of Zorro, 12 Monkeys, Hackers, and like 2 others. I can't remember them. So whatever. Thanks for watching. Bye.